Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Folks, I just wanted to share some thoughts on the topic of the necessity of hadith. Some may ask the question, why aren't all the rulings in the Quran? Instead, you have a lot of rulings in the hadith. And hey, why do I need to follow all these extra rulings because they're not in the Book of Allah? If they were as important, then they would have been in the Book of Allah. Well, you got to keep a few things in mind. Firstly, the main purpose of the Quran is to provide you a general guidance in terms of your connection to Allah, why you're here, where you're going. What you do not have, of course, is a detailed list of every single action. The Quran, of course, is written in a very poetic, eloquent way. And if you had a list of do's and don'ts, that would simply take away from the poetic nature of the Quran. And due to that, you simply have the Quran speaking in general about some orders and some prohibitions. And then you have the Prophet, peace be upon him, expounding upon those and going into detail about those specific matters. That's the first thought I wanted to share. The second thought is this idea of, hey, there are hadith that I just don't like, so I don't want to follow any hadith. You see, that's a strange way of approaching hadith and honestly approaching history. There are many matters in history that we find questionable, and it's not a reason to reject history as a whole. Like imagine someone said, I don't believe that Brutus killed Caesar. I believe this is a fabrication. Therefore, I can't trust history. Like, no one says that. The natural thing to do is to say, yeah, that specific thing I don't trust. But for you to reject history as a whole, that's a strange jump. And unfortunately, we find that with hadith. You have perhaps a narration or two that you find problematic. And instead of saying, yeah, those specific narrations I have trouble swallowing, and you go from there to rejecting thousands of narrations. That doesn't really follow. That doesn't really make too much sense. And what's strange is, as opposed to history, hadith, due to the care of the classical Muslim scholars, they were so rigorous in terms of authenticating the reports, as opposed to any form of classical history, Roman, Greek, Persian. You won't find anything similar to hadith in terms of rigorousness. So, I mean, personally, what would make sense to me is to accept a hadith and reject all of history. That would make a lot more sense than to accept all of history and reject all of hadith. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And thirdly and finally, the Quran, to be truly appreciated, you need to be familiar with the historical context. That's a necessity. If you're not familiar with what's going on at the time, if you're not familiar with their classical language, if you're not familiar with their customs, a chunk of the Quran wouldn't make sense to you because you're a 21st century individual living in a completely different world. One example is chapter 2, verse 189, that says, don't enter houses from the back and enter them from their doors. Like, what's going on here? Well, back in the day, when people were going out to pilgrimage, what used to happen was they felt that they had this superstition that you shouldn't enter your home from the front door if you forgot something. So what they do is they'd go from the back of their houses and they would like they would like actually break through their houses, dig into their houses in order to get whatever they forgot inside. Some random weird superstition. And of course, the Quran says that this is not something good and stop doing it. So it's, again, if you simply look at the Quran, if you read the verses, you'd have no idea what it's talking about. And what you had was second generation Muslims. You even have a companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, speaking about what exactly happened, what exactly is behind those verses, and of course several others, especially when it comes to matters to do with the pilgrimage. Several verses that have to do with the pilgrimage, just by reading them, you'd have no idea what's going on unless you're familiar with the historical context. Now, for more information on the topic of the necessity of hadith, I would recommend a book by yours truly called The Necessity of Hadith, which you can pick up at Dar al-Arqam. By the way, folks, I'm not making any money out of this. It's £6, which is like 7.5 US dollars, and it's quite short. It's a short read. You should finish it in a couple of hours or something. And inshallah, we'll have answers to a lot of your questions that have to do with the topic of the necessity of hadith. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.